Hi, I'm Eric Caren of the Caren Archive, here today to share some really exciting historical items from the Caren Archive that demonstrate just how history unfolded on paper over the last 6 centuries. Today we're going to look at a number of very interesting, original, rare newspapers, broadsides, photographs, manuscripts, and other examples of how history unfolds on paper. I'm rather proud of the fact that what I have collected, approximately 1 million items or more, represents perhaps the most important private holding of this kind of material in existence. The first item I'm showing is a very early example of German journalism known as Neue Zeitung, and this particular one is from 1532 and has a nicely engraved battle scene on the title page. This next news book is extraordinary. It's The Execution of Sir Thomas More. It's a German news book from 1535, and there is a portrait of King Henry VIII on the title page. Here we have a news book printed in English in London in 1587 with a description of the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. Here we have an unrecorded illustrated news sheet on the defeat of the Spanish Armada from 1588. Here we have a rare English version of Debris' views of Roanoke Colony, printed in 1590. The English edition is extremely rare. This is a town plan of Roanoke Colony with the English description of the town. This is a Hogenberg news broadside of the famous, or infamous I should say, Guy Fawkes gunpowder plot of 1606 with contemporary hand coloring. Really a magnificent example of illustrated journalism in the early period. Before there were regularly published printed newspapers, we sometimes had manuscript newsletters, and this is an extraordinary one as it was written in London in 1608 and talks about the second ship coming back from Jamestown Colony with what they thought was gold, but it turned out to be fool's gold. Here we have a real favorite item of mine. This is a 1617 German news book by Holsius, and inside we have the earliest known pictures of Jamestown Colony, including plates of Pocahontas. Included in the Holsius is this stunning map of New England and Virginia, including a wonderful portrait of Captain John Smith in the upper left-hand corner. Here we have a brief relation of the discovery and plantation of New England, an extremely rare English news book from 1622 that came out to report Plymouth Colony and the trip of the Mayflower. Here we have what's considered the first English newspaper, as it was published with the same title and on a periodical basis, the continuation of our weekly news. This particular issue is from 1629. It is unrecorded, and it has news from America. Here we have a wonderful and extremely rare illustrated news broadside printed in Germany showing the execution of Charles I, with portraits of King Charles I, Fairfax, and Cromwell, and then a scene of the executioner holding up Charles I's head. This was done in 1649, right after the execution in Germany. As far as I know, the English didn't issue any illustrated broadsides on the event. Here we have what's considered the first issue of the first formal English language newspaper, so named because it was a single sheet of paper. It's Oxford Gazette No. 1, printed while the Great Plague was going on, and the king and his court removed to Oxford from London and had this newspaper printed up. When the court and the king came back to London, we have the two most important issues of the newly titled London Gazette, the issue with the preliminary account of the Great Fire of London, and then the issue with the major account of the Great Fire of London. As we can see, the type in this issue on the masthead is much smaller, as they had lost type in the fire and had to print this issue actually in the streets. Here's an extraordinary piece of history. The actual letter written and signed by King Charles II with his signature at the heading, whereupon he takes possession of New Netherlands to be known as New York from the Dutch in 1674, together with a view of New Amsterdam the way it looked at the time, printed by Ogilvy. The first newspaper in America was Public Occurrences, which lasted only one issue, but before that, sporadically, we had news books printed in the colonies that talked about current events. There are only a few of them in the 17th century, and this is an important one. This is a history of King Philip's Indian War, published by Mather in Boston in 1676. And inside the Mather, we have what is perhaps the first engraving printed in America, which is the Great Seal of Massachusetts Bay Colony. We see an Indian at the center of it. This is my earliest American broadside. It's an unrecorded one printed in Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1697 during King William's Indian War. Here we have the first successful American newspaper, an issue of the Boston Newsletter. It was simply one sheet printed on both sides, both the recto and the verso, and this particular issue is a real twofer, as it has a report of the death of William Penn and a report of the infamous pirate Blackbeard. And here is an English monthly journal with a full account of how Blackbeard the pirate was killed in hand-to-hand combat, printed in April 1719. Here we have a broadside printed in England. Very interesting. It's the case of William Penn, proprietary governor of Pennsylvania. And essentially, William Penn ran into financial difficulties near the end of his life, and here tried to sell back Pennsylvania to the Crown of England. Here we have an important issue of John Peter Zenger's New York Weekly Journal, the newspaper that led to freedom of the press in America. And this is a very important issue in which he writes from prison that he's been deprived of pen, paper, and his liberty. This is perhaps the earliest American broadside to actually depict an event, and it's the fall of Louisburg during King George's War, printed in Boston in 1745. This most likely is the first headline in an American newspaper. Peace is proclaimed, may plenty ensue, as we see in the first column of the 1763 Maryland Gazette. And this is a headline on the end of the French and Indian War. If I piqued your interest with some of the material that I've shown today, I hope you'll check out thecarenarchive.com.